Technology, disruption, and inclusion. That is the theme of our next panel discussion, which is being moderated by a senior journalist of India who's been in the business from 1991, who actually barely needs any introduction. She's been a Rhodes Scholar and more recently the author of one of India's most famous biographies, Indira, India's most powerful Prime Minister. She's also been the deputy editor and a primetime anchor of CNN IBN. Our moderator is right here. Hash Future is very proud to present Ms. Sagarika Ghosh. Welcome to Hash Future, Ms. Sagarika. Joining her on stage are our panelists. The first person is the Global Chief Information Officer of Dover Corporation, an American conglomerate manufacturer of industrial products. He's responsible for Dover's global IT strategy, cybersecurity, among other things. Proud to present Mr. Dinu John Parel. Our next panelist is the Managing Director of Public Affairs and Strategic Engagements of Cisco Systems, also a proud partner, Mr. Harish Krishnan. Next up is the Professor of Strategy and Management at INSEAD Graduate Business School. He's also the winner of the Academy of International Business Eldridge Haynes Prize in 1998 and the Emerald Award for Top 50 Papers in Management in 2010. Proud to present to you Dr. Subramanian Rangan. The next panelist joining us on stage holds 2 US patents and is an author of more than 100 publications on high-performance computing. He is the director of Oak Ridge National Laboratory, Tennessee, USA, presenting Dr. Thomas Zachariah. The Group Chief Executive Officer of Flytext, a customer data analytics software product company, a man who has over 20 years of experience in senior management roles in technology startups. Joining us on stage is Mr. Vinod Vasudevan. And completing this panel on stage is our own chairman of HPIC, Mr. S.T. Shibulal. Of course, co-founder and former CEO and MD of Infosys. Over to you, Ms. Sagarika.
Thank you very much for being here. It's wonderful to be here at the Futures Summit. And I particularly congratulate the Kerala government and the initiative of Mr. Shibulal to host this conference on the future of digital technologies and how digital technologies can make our lives so much better. I think the Chief Minister spelled out a very visionary statement when he said that he is going to introduce Wi-Fi zones in Kerala and is going to make Kerala much more digital friendly. I think for a knowledge-based, highly educated state like Kerala, it really does make a lot of sense to embrace digital technologies. The subject of our discussion is technology, disruptions, and inclusion. We're going to look at how technology is changing our lives, how businesses can rise to the challenge of new technologies, how technologies can disrupt, and how they can include sections who are alienated from the mainstream, those alienated from livelihoods or from incomes. They can be brought in through technology into the mainstream. Technology conjures up all kinds of exciting scenarios. If any of you are fans of the book Homo Deus, you would have read that Yuval Noah Harari says in the book that the one word that is going to dominate the 21st century is going to be the word algorithm. And this is going to dominate the way machines and human beings as well function. And we are going to see the rise of a supercomputer, which is going to be Deus, in fact, God, in how intelligent it is. From my own perspective as a journalist, I know that digital technologies are soon probably going to make television and newspapers extinct. You're probably going to get news technologies on your mobile phones. There are 900 million phones, of them 550 are smartphones. So it's not a long way off to assume that the newspaper and TV will probably become extinct, and all you'll need is the mobile phone to get your news and information. Well, we have a very high-powered panel here to talk about technology, disruption, and inclusion. We've divided it into 3 segments, kindly guided by Professor Rangan, who has provided us with a wonderful outline. We're going to use the first 15 minutes of our discussion to talk about technology reimagined. What are the challenges of the new technology? Where is the new technology today? What is noteworthy today? What's frightening? As Raghuram Rajan said, we don't have to fear that we're going to lose our jobs to machines, but is there anything frightening? Is there anything noteworthy? In the second segment, we're going to look at business reimagined. How can businesses adapt to this new technology? How can businesses grow more friendly to this new technology? And in the third segment, we're going to devote the most amount of time to talking about Kerala reimagined and how Kerala can improve its service delivery, its education, health, its delivery of citizens' services through digital technologies. So that's the broad theme of our discussion, and towards the end, for half an hour, we'll have a question-answer session, so you'll get a chance to talk to our very high-profile panelists. Let's kick it off straight away with Mr. Shibulal. Where is this new digital technology today? What's noteworthy? What do we have to celebrate? What do we have to be scared about?
Good morning, everyone. Actually, so we had sent out a bunch of questions, and I was thinking about it. There are 2 technologies which excite me the most today. Of course, the first one is artificial intelligence, machine learning. There are many reasons. I think for the last 1.5 days, we have heard about all the reasons why it is exciting. First of all, it doesn't sleep. It doesn't get tired. It works around the clock. It can do things which we cannot do. For example, in the recent times, I've seen a lot of companies working on image analytics, figuring out, reading MRIs, X-rays, echograms, all which is done by humans today. And in India alone, I think if you look at the number of radiologists available, it is some 51,000 or something, whereas the need is some 5 times or 10 times that, which means the shortage is huge. And the machines, if you can help us do it, that will be fantastic. And also, it can be done in a time and space invariant manner. That means where the radiology happens, whereas where the diagnostics happen is a completely different time frame, completely different place, and a level of accuracy which is probably much better than today. But as we heard, it has to be augmenting human skills. It cannot be, I don't think it will replace human skills. It will be augmenting the skills. Now, the scary part of AI, I think we talked about job loss and all these various aspects. Yesterday, I was having an interesting conversation with one of the speakers, and it dawned on me that one of the scary part of AI is loss of causality. In my mind, loss of causality, because when humans are considered as unpredictable. That means when I interact with somebody, the reaction which I get is based on so many factors, so many legacy issues, so many experience, so much of knowledge, and every interaction changes. So if I interact with you today and if I interact with you tomorrow, this conversation would change the interaction. Right? The way we converse will be different tomorrow because this conversation has happened. Now with AI, you are going to start seeing the same issue because it is learning, right? And every data input which goes into it will change the behavior of the AI itself. Computers are supposed to be predictable. At least I always used to say computers don't make error. They don't make a mistake because it is programmed, it will do exactly what it is asked to do, and it is supposed to be predictable, whereas when AI comes into picture, that predictability is going to be lost. So when Facebook is establishing a connect with whom you can be friend with, every connect is changing the next connect, how it will behave. So it is the causality which we always used to expect with a machine is going to be, in my mind, going to be lost. And that is actually very scary because we are used to having machines which are predictable and we are used to having humans which are unpredictable. Now we will have to deal with both at home.
So we're going to have unpredictable machines.
Right. The second technology which excites me the most is genomics because when in the recent past I've been involved in healthcare, and if I look at it, the medical science have come a long way in the last many years, but most of it is in diagnostics. Most of it is in diagnostics, how you can diagnose the ailment, but nothing really has happened in prevention. Even the advances which we have made in cardiac care is mostly a mechanical intervention. It's not, in my mind, less of a biological intervention, more a mechanical intervention. And things like Alzheimer's, Parkinson's, even cancer. Cancer is an epidemic in India today, in Kerala especially. But the medicines are purely experimental, whereas I'm hoping that gene therapy will bring out some kind of way to correct this and make it preventable rather than just curative. But the scary part is that will allow me to choose make a choice that I want a child who is white instead of black. I want a child who is 8 feet tall rather than 6 feet. And that is the scary part of that. So both these technologies, AI and genomics, are enormously interesting, exciting to me, but both has this scary side.
That's a very interesting point. The technologies that actually start off as cures and as preventions actually end up into genetic engineering and into all kinds of experimentations. Harish, let me ask you to take off on that. Do you find that scary?
Yeah, I do. But I just want to step back and we have had a lot of discussions on AI, and we had Raghuram Rajan and Satyam Nadella to speak about it. So, what excites me most about technology today is the pervasiveness and the penetration of technology. The first 3 billion people came online in 25 years. The next 3 billion are going to come in 7 years. And something like 18 billion things are connected today on the net, and it's going to become 500 billion in 10 years' time. So the sheer pervasiveness and penetration is amazing. And if you bring it to India, we have something like 100 million subscribers already on the internet, and the 400 million smartphone users already there. And we heard the Chief Minister talk yesterday about the Wi-Fi penetration that's going to happen in Kerala, and a number of other steps are being taken. The government of India is doing the Bharat Net, which is going to connect up the 250,000 villages in India. So this is going to bring technology to the hands of a lot of people, which I think is clearly the defining thing in the next 5 to 10 years from an India perspective. We also heard Nandan speak yesterday about the trinity of JAM, Jandan, Aadhaar, and mobile, where we bring in financial inclusion coupled with the enablement of Aadhaar and mobile, which is going to open up a lot of possibilities. In Cisco, we believe that when you connect the unconnected, magic happens. I think we're about to see magic. And in terms of fear, clearly in terms of data privacy and security, when everything is connected to everything else, there's going to be a lot of fear on data security. We're having a lot of conversation about it these days. And cybersecurity, apparently we had 27,000 breaches in India in 2017. And I believe there are only 2 types of organizations, one that has been hacked and others that do not know they have been hacked. So that's what it is.
So, Vinod, let me bring you in here on that point. Harish talked about the fact that so many millions of people are coming online, but the fact is what's going to happen to all that data? And is it secure? Is it safe? This is dominating the headlines at the moment.
Yeah, yeah, I think before I get to that very specifically, let's look at what are the major trends that if we see from a 5 to 10 year perspective. I think there are 4 things that will define what the disruption on the 5 to 10 year horizon. One is algorithms and computing. That's what we are today talking about as AI, machine learning, blockchain, and in the next 5 to 10 years, it could be something else. You know, all this deep learning, neural networks was a hype in the early 90s. I did my PhD then in neural networks. But then it went into a trough of disillusionment until a deep learning algorithm or a learning algorithm for multi-layered neural networks was published by Professor Hinton from University of Toronto in 2010. So it could change tomorrow. It could go from machine learning to maybe machine discovery, which is today talked about as a sibling of this. The second trend is communication. Today, all of us have a 4G device. What was it like 20 years ago? Can you imagine that? There were only 29 cities in India where you could use a credit card because of connectivity was not there. The then Reliance, which I was part of, it took it from 29 cities to 1,400 cities in a span of less than a year. So the 4G, 5G trials are already happening. There's one new generation of wireless technology roughly every 10 years. So in the next 10 years, you will see that 5G is commonplace and 6G is almost there, which really is talking about combining fixed, wireless, satellite, and providing the quality of service. We heard about telemedicine. Imagine a robo or a doctor sitting in a remote location and performing a surgery remotely, and then the system buffering. You don't want that. That's what
Not
6G
in the middle
is
of a
going to happen.
surgery, no.
So 6G is going to basically talk about that, quality of service, so you really can perform it. So I think these are some of the things, and then we heard about mixed reality. What is our interface to this digital world today? It's still the printer and the screen and the mouse, one or other shape. You touch, you use the mouse. I think it's going to change. There's going to be other interfaces, like 3D printing is already there. It's very expensive and customized, but in 10 years, it could become commonplace. You have artificial smell generation, artificial touch generation. If you combine this sort of instantaneous communication, this compute power, etc., I could be sitting anywhere. I mean, Sirosh didn't have to be limited to being on the screen. He could be sitting on a chair here and actually shaking hands. That won't happen in 10 years, but just laying out that part of it. Now, what is exciting about it and scary? You asked that question about it. That also covers the data privacy part of it. I think one exciting thing, I'm taking off a little bit on what I was talking to some of the other speakers and what Raghuram Rajan, our ex-RBI governor, mentioned. In 2016, somewhere between 26 billion and 40 billion US dollars was invested into AI. That's hugely exciting because that shows what kind of innovation you could expect from that. That's a combinatorial innovation that Mr. Nilekani spoke about yesterday. So the exciting part is it's going to make production, transportation, the availability of goods, services, etc., so much cheaper and affordable, leading naturally to, say, inclusion. I had an example, which maybe I'll use throughout my talk. If I need to replace my eyeglasses today, I'll go to an optometrist, I'll go to a store selling the frames, I'll place the order, then I get it collected a few days later. Imagine that when all this technology is there, including 3D printing, in 10 years' time, I think it'll happen in 10 years' time. I could basically take a video or a picture of my eyes, send it across, it gets analyzed, and I will say, Alexa, I need new eyeglasses costing around 5,000 rupees. Alexa is Amazon Echo and the service. And it gets printed out in my home 3D printer. in Kerala, you don't need a home 3D printer. You can get it printed in the next door Akshaya center. Imagine every primary health center being able to do this. It will transform inclusion and availability. But it brings a whole host of issues. If the eyeglasses don't work, whose fault is it? Is it my printer? Or is it the person who sold me or supplied it to me? Or is it the optometrist? Now, what if I copy that and send to another printer and make 2 of them? There are all kinds of issues happening. So, but the real scary part about this technology is that people are scared about technology. You know, Brunswick did a survey recently, and it was shown that 83% of people said we are very appreciative about technology and we look forward to adopting new technology. Wonderful. But 78% said we are scared of technology. And the scare happens due to multiple reasons. I think there are many, some of them I mentioned already about trust and privacy and other things you talked about. But it also is about, I think the most dominant fear, which I see even when I try to go and sell my product in some developed markets, the first question that gets asked is what will happen to my team? We sell products that practically replace marketeers in B2C companies. And we have to really answer that question sometimes. But anyway, the fear is really about jobs. No, jobs will, as we know today, will be lost. But new jobs will be created. 75% of people in our company are not from the don't do traditional IT work. They're either doing machine learning, or they're data engineers, data analysts, data scientists, data quality assurance, you call it. I mean, it's all to do with data. Titles didn't exist 10 years ago. But how do we address this scary part? I think that is really, really the key. I mean, I think there is businesses, government, media. It's a fear of technology.
The fear of technology is itself what is scary about technology.
It is the scary, and we need to address that. I'll just take a cue from what just 30 seconds.
Yeah.
Mr. Shivulal talked to me when we first had a conversation about Hash Future, that we need to have a social discourse about it. It's really about convincing the masses that, okay, you should be scared about jobs being lost, but there'll be new jobs coming up. So I think that is really, so I just sort of combined a bunch of things.
Let me just get Thomas to react to that. You know, the fact that, actually Mr. Shivulal and Vinod both saying that the application of digital technologies to healthcare particularly are very, very hopeful. Diagnostics, reaching out to primary health centers, those are very, very hopeful. But at the same time, there is that fear of technology and the fear of what that technology will do. What is your prediction over the next 10 years?
Well, first of all, let me wish all of you a wonderful, wonderful day. And because I can't tell whether this is morning or afternoon. This is the first time that I have been back to my hometown in Cochin. So this is a great opportunity to be back here. I'm part of an organization that has seen and has influenced how humanity has evolved, whether it is the birth of nuclear energy, computing, etc. But you asked, because you talked about healthcare, let me just give you an anecdote. In 1993 is when the Department of Energy had the idea of using supercomputers to do essentially computational genomics, to really map the human genome. And I just want to let you know that nobody in this audience is smart enough to predict the future. We all have certain perceptions of the future. And so David Baltimore, who is a Nobel Prize winner, is a physician. He said that we could not actually use supercomputing to map the human genome. And I will tell you that it is the DOE laboratories, together with Craig Venter, who you use a shotgun sequencing, which at the time took a $200 million supercomputer to map. And today you have Map My Genome companies that does this for us very, very inexpensively. If you look at that arc from 1993, where we required a $200 million supercomputer to map or to sequence map and sequence 3 genomes. It's actually, Oak Ridge was responsible for chromosomes 5, 15, and 19, I believe, right? To where we are today, it is driven by the technology. So the Moore's law, the underlying hardware technology is what has driven all this excitement. So in 1965, Gordon Moore was a founder of Intel, predicted or observed that the number of transistors will double in an integrated circuit every 12 months. Since then, it has become 18 months and now 24 months. But just to give you an example of what that means, the exponential growth means, let me give you an illustration that has been used by a number of people, which is if you take a chessboard and put a grain of rice on the first square, double it, put 2 grains of rice in the second square, and so on. The heap of rice that'll be on that 64 squares will be as tall as the Himalayas. So that is really what the impact and the power of exponentials, which typically human beings have a difficult time grasping. Another important factor is that on the 33rd square, right, the amount of rice that will be on the 33rd square will be more than all the rice in the first 32 squares. So this is why, in fact, Ray Kurzweil said that we are in the second half of the chessboard where each doubling of technology provides so much of disruption, so much of transformation. And a couple of things were mentioned. In fact, Shibulal mentioned about genomics. Gene editing, CRISPR-Cas9 is something that people have sort of postulated that both the positive aspects for curing diseases, but also the impact that it could have in terms of genetic engineering, both for good and bad. And I will not go into the scary scenarios, but there are many. And then the other thing that I would say, the final thing that I would add is that I'm really excited about the future because I think that the convergence of software, hardware, and the applications, the interaction with society at large, offers a tremendous opportunity. And so I, for myself, am really, really, really happy that I'm living in this time when the technology is in the second half of the chessboard, where every 24 months or 36 months, we have the ability to reinvent ourselves.
Reinvent, and it's making a real difference to people who earlier were outside the technological ambit. Just to take off from where Thomas left off, Dino, I mean, do you also feel that at the end, you know, of course there are scary parts of this technology, as he was saying, the genetic engineering, as Mr. Shibulal mentioned, it doesn't start with the desire to genetically engineer, it begins with curing and prevention, but ends up something a little bit perhaps wicked. So, but where do you stand in terms of the hardware? Where is the excitement? Where is the fear?
Perfect. Thank you, Sagarika. First of all, really glad to be here. Thank you, Shibulal, for the invite. It's really exciting to be with, so many great speakers. But there's also a challenge with that. When you're on the second day with so many great speakers, pretty much everyone said everything you've planned to say, right? But there was one thing that I was sure that nobody else would say. It was going to be my opening line that I was born in Lissi Hospital in Ernakulam. But even that was said, right? So, but, it's, what I'm going to try to say right now is just some experience from my perspective. Right?
But hopefully there was no buffering while you were being born.
Right. At least have something common with someone really successful. Well, just to give a background, so I'm responsible for IT. I'm the CIO for a global diversified manufacturing company. So just like a lot of the other industries that you've heard from, even for us, digital is something that we're embracing mainly for 3 reasons. One, because of the whole customer experience. Second is really to create more adjacent markets, to create that new revenue channels. And the third, as a manufacturing company, constantly trying to find ways to reduce our cost. So, especially being diversified, there's so many areas that I have the exposure to as far as like digital and the new trends. But to your question, what are the 3 that I see personally that is upcoming from a work perspective that's manufacturing, but also on the personal side? The 3, and they're in 3 stages of the hype cycle. It's AI that you've heard so much about. It's augmented reality and blockchain, right? So AI, we've been doing AI for so long. You've heard about it over and over. In the manufacturing side, we've been working on this for a while with the whole predictive and preventive maintenance. But what's exciting is really when you think about in the next few years when that smart machine can be even more smarter, when you really start using AI with what you've heard, which is machine learning, and when it can really interpret that data by itself, and you can really start working with that machine more real time in that shop floor. And that's exciting in the manufacturing industry, and I'm sure with a lot of other companies and industries that's also common. Augmented reality for me is personally something that I see is going to transform what we do on our day-to-day lives. I started believing in it when I first saw the whole Pokemon game that many of you have probably heard about. It's real, right? And the reason why I say it's going to transform our lives is because it's going to be something that's tangible, that's real, and you can view it. Unlike other technologies, you're actually going to see it, and it's going to change the way we work and the way we do business and the way we interact with each other. So we work with a lot of these grocery stores, and it's only fair to imagine a day when you could walk into a grocery store and you could only see the food that you actually want to buy, which is based on your diet restrictions or perhaps your preference, and everything else just goes away when you look at it from an augmented reality perspective. Or even more applicable for today in this audience is walking into a conference like this. And I'm sure, like we just found out, I have things in common with people like Lizzie Hospital. You could actually see only the people that you perhaps have something in common with. And that actually enables you to start those conversations and discuss. And a lot of these people are talking about it, and I believe it's not too far away that it's going to happen, and we'll be dealing with that. What's scary is perhaps the whole concept of everybody being rated and scored, right? It's already happening with Uber. When you walk into an Uber car, the Uber driver and the customer both rate each other. Someday in the whole augmented reality realm, you could probably be rating each other. And that's scary when you think about all those people that you pissed off, right? And the third is really blockchain. And I feel blockchain goes back to this whole topic about inclusiveness. And that's really going to create the opportunity for a lot more people to be able to use that technology, especially in the banking industry. People talk about how, this technology is going to allow a lot of billions of people to have those, banking privileges that they don't have access to today in the traditional banks. Or if you think about, just like Uber, for example, you don't need a middleman anymore because you can have that whole peer-to-peer relationship. And then really from a voting perspective and government, right? Dubai has already claimed that by 2020, they'll be completely on blockchain with all their government documents. And then voting, you already have some really great startups, including Follow My Vote and Democracy Earth that already started like softwares that's going to enable us to vote electronically through blockchain. So I think there's some amazing technologies out there, and I think it's a prime time. But the one thing that you've probably heard before is we always overestimate perhaps what's going to happen near time and underestimate what's going to happen in a little longer term. So you have to be pragmatic about it.
Right, but that was very educative in the way that the new technologies can deepen democratization and, of course, can bring services and can bring healthcare and can bring education. But I found that very interesting what you said about what it can do to government and how actually it can deliver services to the citizen in terms of governance. But Professor Rangan, put this all in perspective for us and tell us how inclusive is this technology, how disruptive is this technology, and when you look at inclusiveness and disruption on the two sides, are you optimistic or are you pessimistic? Does the inclusion aspect of it, of bringing in, people who are disabled, who are suffer from disabilities of income or suffer from disabilities of livelihood, or women or underrepresented minorities, how can they be included, or is the disruptive element going to overtake the positive inclusive elements?
Good morning. So I think from a technology point of view, one thing, if I can start by saying what surprised me, is the speed of adoption. On the B2C side, today, I think there's hardly anyone that does not use search. Search is such a ubiquitous, simple technology. And it does make our life, everything seems accessible. Social is another thing. I don't participate in social much, but I know that for billions and billions of people in the world, social has been an incredible, almost consumer ubiquitous technology. On the B2B side, cloud computing and now cognitive all of this is quite remarkable, and the connectivity that has made all of this a reality for us will continue. And so I think we feel like magicians with all of us have a magic wand, and we have more and more algorithms that are going to give us incantations with which we can make magic. Now, if we step back from this, what's actually going on? There are a couple of things that I'd like to point out. One is, if you look at the way we would consider a modern economy, we started with some factor called land. And so before humans, there was land, and eventually we had labor. And in any simple production function, these were the two main factors of production, land and labor. Then suddenly, thousands of years passed, about 8,000, 9,000 years, and then we had this new industrial age, and we created a third factor of production, which is physical capital. Machines, factories, tools. And with that, we needed the financial capital to buy all these machines. So we had this multi-factor modern economy with land, labor, and physical and financial capital. In the last century, in the 20th century, we suddenly discovered an activity called R&D. With R&D, we created the fifth factor of production called intellectual capital. This is our story so far. In this century, we are creating an entirely new factor of production, cyber capital. So to natural capital, to human capital, to fixed and financial capital, and to intellectual capital. Intellectual capital was the first factor that was scalable. Make once, use a billion times, intellectual capital. Cyber capital is even more powerful than intellectual capital. When you reuse intellectual capital, it doesn't get better. Cyber capital, the more we use it, the better it gets. This is an incredibly powerful new frontier. And that's why we feel it. We feel it, and we see it already in the stock market, that there are companies which are based on cyber capital. Companies like GE and Siemens are based on intellectual capital and physical capital. Those companies are still very valuable, but the most valuable companies in the world today are cyber capital companies. What is cyber capital? They're built on two things, code and content. Code makes things simpler. Content makes things smarter. And this is the frontier where we are kind of headed. And it's up to all of us. So the second point is that we've had until now three sectors. We've had a primary sector, mining and manufacturing, mining and agriculture, fisheries, everything to do with natural capital. A secondary sector with transformation, which was manufacturing. And a tertiary sector, which is where most of us are, which is services, education, healthcare, IT services, accounting, real estate, etc. Retail and wholesale trade. Welcome to the quaternary sector. The quaternary sector is the fourth sector. It is the sector of creativity. It is a sector where the winner can take all. And this part too is scary. And if our human capital skills are not oriented to the quaternary sector, we may feel a sense of anxiety, and rightly so. And finally, the main question, am I optimistic or pessimistic? There are always, in any new generation of technology, in any evolution like this, there are winners and losers. In this particular case, my deepest hope, more than optimism, Sagarika, is can we be modern and can we be moral?
It's a great question.
It's our choice. It's our choice. Fire was one of the most important technologies. Perhaps fire was the first technology, and it made our brains bigger, and we could digest food, and it was fantastic. Machines made our body stronger, gave us power, horsepower. This new technology, I hope, will make our souls better. I want us to go from Homo sapiens to Homo sentiens. Can we be feeling for one another? Can we have better well-being? So,
I think that is a wonderful sentiment. we cannot afford to reach a stage where we are super intelligent, but we lack consciousness. Where we have super intelligent machines, but they are amoral or unconscious beings who cannot make moral choices. You also said the breakneck level of technology today. I mean, in biotechnology, nanotechnology, genetic engineering. I'm now hearing, as journalists, we hear about a new project that Google has started called Calico, which is about the immortality project, which is man trying to win over death. The death will be seen as nothing but a technical glitch, which can be fixed in a lab. So man will then try to become immortal and, as the book says, Homo Deus. There will be nanotechnology, which will create nano-robots patrolling up and down our bloodstream, which is going to actually find out a disease and kill the disease before it can even grow. So we will literally double our life expectancy from 75 in the 20th century to 150 in the 21st century. So there are all these exciting things. As you said, as you so beautifully put it, Professor Rangan, it is that the technology is there. We needed to use it to be moral as well as modern. Let's move on to our next segment. Mr. Shibulal, we're now talking in this segment about reimagining business and how can businesses adjust to this new technology. What should businesses do? What are the challenges for the businesses of today to rise to this new technology?
So I think these technologies which we talk about are all going to become practical tomorrow. So many of these technologies will change the way we experience life, the way we live. For example, transportation is an area where we will see enormous amount of changes. Of course, space travel. I got an invitation to go to Russia to see the rocket launch, because there is a company in California which is trying to enlist people for space tourism. And their first step is to take you to Russia and show you how the space travel will happen. So all of these realities and all of these technologies will become real over a period of time. See, in business, what I have found is that every business have a set of strategies which they try to operationalize, and the fundamental purpose of a business is to be customer relevant. You need to be relevant to your customers. Customers are finally the judges, and you need to be. Customer relevance is the most important thing in a business. And what happens with these technologies is that your strategies become obsolete within about 3 to 5 years. So I always say that every strategy which you roll out, whichever one it is, so any one of these strategies which you roll out, which will make it relevant to your customers, will disappear in 3 to 5 years. So the biggest challenge for businesses is to adapt, to change, but also to destroy themselves so that they can reinvent, which most businesses find it extremely hard. Because most businesses tend to protect the turf in which they operate, hoping that it will not change, but it will change. Each one of these disruptions will happen. For example, electric cars are going to destroy the traditional automotive industry. Sustainable energy is going to destroy the coal industry and the traditional energy production. Any preventive healthcare which comes in will destroy the procedural approach which we have today. Today you have a procedural approach to medicine. If you come up with a preventive approach, that will destroy the procedural approach to medicine. But most businesses tend to hang on to their success, because success is very difficult to argue with. Right. All successful businesses have been successful because they did a set of things. They had a set of strategies which they executed, and those strategies were extremely customer relevant. It is very difficult to argue with success. Right. But you need to make this change when you are most successful, not when you are on the downturn. Because the moment you start sliding down, it becomes even more harder for you to change, because you don't have the resources to change at that point in time. When you are most successful, you need to change, and that is very, very hard for businesses. So my advice to business is always to consider your strategies having a life of maybe 3 to 5 years. continuously reinvent the strategies. Along with that, you need to reinvent the talent itself, because new strategies will require new talent, which means you need to reinvent your talent.
Right. Harish, do you agree with what Mr. Shibulal said, that businesses are actually notoriously slow to adapt?
Absolutely, I agree. And just before that, to your point about Google trying to win over immortality, I was having a conversation with my mother about, we always say when somebody dies, we don't take anything with us. And my mother said, just imagine if you did, what kind of disorder that will create in society, right? So in terms of, the business innovation, I think we have spoken a lot about technology. Again, I talked about when you connect the unconnected, magic happens. And we've spoken about education, healthcare, and all those panels that we had in the last couple of days. But I think what really lacks is business innovation to catch that. Yesterday, Mr. Moopan talked about telemedicine. I think the telemedicine has been around for a long, long time. The ability of technology to solve social problems, especially medicine, has been proven again and again. But I think we still, like was mentioned yesterday, we still dial a doctor for appointment, take 30 minutes or half an hour to reach the hospital, and then spend another half an hour. In fact, in Delhi, when you go into the hospital, in a corporate hospital, somebody does a physical frisking of you when you enter the hospital. And I many times think that he is the business development manager of the hospital, because so many other germs kind of transmit to you and you catch so much of infection in the hospital. And then you spend time with the doctor, and then you still go back to the pharmacist for medicine, etc. So the ability of technology to solve this problem has been around for a long time, but we have still not cracked the code in terms of a business model, especially so in rural India. So can we, for example, if I look at the next 4 to 5 years, that is a word that I think is most exciting, is when we really get business to innovate and use technology for getting to the end point that we need to. For example, in rural India, can we have a system of health coupons that the government can provide to the disadvantaged people, who can exchange the coupon for a health service? Therefore, it kind of goes beyond a CSR activity into a commercial activity, into a scale activity. So I think to take technology to scale, we need business innovation. I think that's something that we're lacking at this point in time.
Right. Again, to take off from what Harish said, all the verticals, for example, the verticals in Kerala, transport, hospitality, education, health, how can businesses adapt better to this new technology, and why aren't they?
Okay, so, businesses fall into different categories. I'll just limit myself to talking about B2C businesses. We've heard Mr. Matthews talk about having to go direct to consumer, direct to customer, customer-centric, etc. So all businesses, B2C, is about selling something to the customer, and I believe what's going to happen is the process of selling is going to change fundamentally. Russell Davis, the head of planning at Ogilvy and Mather, he made a statement some time back saying that we are going towards a time when everything will be sold in plain packages. That means there's no branding. And he said that in the context that advertising will sort of die as we know it today. So there is no brand, there's no brand loyalty, and it's no longer about the product and services that you're offering, but it's about the customer. It's really about the customer's expectation, the customer's experience, which we have been hearing all along as you need to personalize for the customer. So the experience you create is what's going to drive the business, and not the product and services. So you need to understand your customer very deeply.
That's very interesting. I think we should flag that it's how a business deals with its customer.
Yes.
That's what's going to be more important rather than the product it's selling.
Absolutely. And I'm not the first person to say that. We have had the speakers right from the CIO of Emirates who came in and said, and the CIO of Lufthansa who made the same statements. So it is the customer experience. It's not really the product and services. And that needs people or businesses to adopt AI, data analytics, machine learning, to be able to personalize and provide personalized customer experiences. So I see a lot of businesses when I go around to our customers and others who use this technology somewhat to make, let's say, increase business performance, corporate performance in the traditional metric sense. but they still need a lot of help to do it. So if you're a company, if you're in the business of helping others adopt AI, machine learning, etc., to address this new challenge of creating customer experiences rather than products and services, it's a huge opportunity for you. If you're somebody who is intending to start a business out there, yes, that's a huge opportunity again. And if you're already a B2C business, think about customer experience, not about more than about your products and services.
Right. I think that's very interesting. Do you want to take off from that? That it's really about the customer, but also what Mr. Shibulal was saying was that successful businesses actually don't want to adapt because they're saying, hey, we've got it right so far. Why should we change? But what Vinod was saying, that it's important now, not the product. It's really how you deal with your customer. I think that's a very interesting point. And do you want to elaborate on that?
No, absolutely. So I would say something that you heard yesterday, which is key, is all that you're hearing right now about digital, it's not about the technology. It's actually about changing the business model, right? Technology really comes with it. It's really about just enabling the new business model. And every company has to look at their business model and see if they're suited for what's coming in the next few years. With that in mind, the one thing I will add, from a CIO perspective, for anyone here that's a CIO, aspiring CIO, or supporting any of the technology companies out there, something that you've all probably heard about, the word technical debt, right? So technical debt is what you've accrued all those years by underinvestment in IT. So while a lot of these companies are trying to really embrace digital and invest into all these new technologies, you have all that technical debt at the same time. And as a company, as an enterprise, you really need to understand how to balance those two equations. And that's really serious, but like something that we should really focus on as a service, as a leader, to try to bring both of those together, because otherwise it's going to start hurting you from really moving to the future.
That's very interesting again. Thomas, do you want to just pick up on that? That you really need to change not just your business, not just your, the way you sell your product, but your business model. That has to change if you're going to really integrate these technologies and make the best use of these technologies.
So I will respond to it from my vantage point would be a little bit more of a societal point of view. So I believe that technology is a great equalizer, and certainly it has implications in terms of how we deliver services. So you can talk about it as business models, or you can talk about it in the context of innovation. So I will talk about it in the context of innovation. If you think about manufacturing, digital manufacturing is here to stay. Digital manufacturing allows you to manufacture in place. So already 3D printing, large additive manufacturing is allowing people to go print the turbine blades of windmills on site, because the regular transportation roadways would be very difficult to carry these huge turbine blades. So it is changing, the technology and innovation is changing how you do business, because it's giving you great flexibility, right? The automation both in terms of factory floors. In fact, there's a great article called A Dark Factory, October issue of New Yorker, where basically it says there will not be any human being in this particular factory. Now, I'm not suggesting that that is desirable or that's the end state, but there is greater integration, greater automation. And the one area where you're going to see greater automation has been discussed, and that is transportation, right? Even though Uber had this accident, a fatality just recently, what people don't realize is that there are about 84 million accidents globally every year, right? And over 1 million fatalities globally every year on transportation roadways. There are somewhere between 10 to 40 trillion miles that these vehicles drive on the roads. It's perfect, and it is the most inefficient mode of transportation, right? You are basically taking an automobile that is designed to carry 5 or so passengers and maybe 5,000 pounds in the US context, and you basically use it to drive one person, and probably the maximal use in most places is about an hour a day. That is not an efficient use of resources, and that will drive automation. The flip side of it is that, at least in the US, something of the order of 20% of all jobs has driving as part of their job description. Long-haul trucking is probably where the biggest innovation is going to be, or the early adoption would be, because the incremental cost of autonomy is very small compared to the cost of the big trucks. Most of the travel miles is on highways, which is easier than traveling or navigating through the city streets. And the downside of that innovation is that today in the US, you do not need to be a college grad to have a fairly high-paying job, somewhere between $50,000 to $100,000 for a truck driver on these big trucks. That jobs are going to be disrupted. And the third area that I would say is medicine and how we deliver medicine. In fact, we recently have a Department of Energy as a collaboration with GlaxoSmithKline. Big pharma invests, any one of these pharmas would invest anywhere between $3 to $5 billion in R&D to bring a drug to market. And going in, they know that their success rate is going to be somewhere less than 5%, right? And so if you start 100 projects, you are guaranteed that 95% of the projects are not going to be successful. These library of compounds are available. They're making it open source so that it can be, the larger population can have access to these molecules to see whether they can deliver personalized medicine. So I think it's really an exciting time in terms of how innovation will drive changes in delivering critical services.
Innovations are going to drive changes, and businesses have to adapt. Professor Rangan, I'm going to come to you again for the defining perspective on businesses and how the business model has to change. Vinod saying customer, Thomas saying that, it's going to be disruptive whether you like it or not. Mr. Shibulal saying that, businesses don't want to change, they're notoriously resistant to change. Hari saying they're going to have to accept. So, how can businesses, particularly Kerala businesses, hospitality, tourism, transport, health, where do you see the challenges that these businesses face in adapting these new technologies, and what can they gain from adapting these new technologies?
So for anybody who's here from a business, the way we think about our performance is categorized in three things, Sagarika. In business schools, we teach it as sustainable, profitable growth. A business that is profitable, a business that is growing, and a business that is doing so sustainably is what we would consider a successful business. Now, Cyber Capital, which is founded on multiple technologies, but as I said, code and content, how can that enhance sustainable, profitable growth? We looked at, with a co-author of mine, a person named Dan Elron, who's a partner at Accenture, we looked at 100 companies across a variety of industries, and maybe a little more than 100 companies. And we saw how are they using this technology. And there were three particular things that stand out. One was cost productivity. A second was revenue productivity, and the third was risk productivity. They were using technology, code and content, to enhance these three things. As you can imagine, the preponderance of uses, about 80% of these companies were focused on cost productivity. Simple thing like digitization. Today, nobody goes, or very few people actually go to the airport and get your boarding pass. We all do it by a mobile phone. The traditional activity still exists. The business model is pretty much the same, but the number of activities that can now be digitized, and therefore the labor and the time that is being substituted, and the physical assets like a branch or something like that being substituted, you reduce cost dramatically. Yeah. And a second thing that is happening is more aggressive companies are reconfiguring their value chains so that they can remove steps that are not needed. And the third very exciting thing is augmenting the human. So whether it's a Google Glass or some such equivalent, today we are able to bring this technology and get costs down, and this is going to continue. Revenue productivity is really about data products. If you take Monsanto, there's a small amount of farming here. We know that today Monsanto uses the data platform, and they have a good idea of the hygrometry, where to use the fertilizer, which kind of crop to plant, all of this. And not only is that data there, it's already being transmitted to the Caterpillar self-driving harvester or the machine, the farm equipment. And so this kind of, and very important, Sagarika, is the experience innovation, customer intimacy. This is another way to kind of get revenue productivity. Finally, on the risk side, business models are very, very fundamental. Not for everybody, but if you're in the media business or if you're in certain particularly affected industries, this is about 10-20% of businesses are affected on the business model. There you do have to rethink. A BMW is thinking not about selling cars, it's going more from ownership to usership.
Right.
And how, if you don't have pricing models, if you don't have distribution models, if you don't have tracking models for usership, you may be behind. A second thing, very important, is cybersecurity. The risk today, as we open up to partnerships and ecosystems, this is an amazingly important thing. But if you'll allow me to make 2 more points to businesses here. For Kerala, the most important thing, it seems to me, and what I've learned from talking to a few entrepreneurs here, is not really as yet kind of code and content as much as focus on capabilities. If Kerala is going to improve productivity and really register economically, punch at its weight economically, the most important thing is for Kerala businesses to develop distinctive capabilities. And that may be related also to kind of what the culture of work is and how the government plays a role in that.
And I think that takes us very nicely to our next segment, which is we are going to look at the challenges that Kerala faces particularly and what Kerala can do, given its realities, to adapt to these new technologies. And I think this will be the last segment of our discussion, and then we can wrap it up for question and answer. Mr. Shibulal, I'm going to start with you. What are the realities of Kerala today? How can the real challenges of Kerala on health, on education, on jobs? We already know there's a huge educated force, there's a skilled labor force, but how can they provide opportunities through these new technologies?
So actually, this is about the future, so I'm going to sidestep that a little bit. And if I look at Kerala and I imagine Kerala 20 or 30 years from now, Kerala is a very unique society. It is a small state, 33 million people, highly educated, highly connected, all of those things, right? So if you imagine, and if you can imagine Kerala, so one thing which comes to mind is, can Kerala become completely cashless? Completely cashless, because that is a use of this technology. If Kerala decides that we will completely become cashless, you can imagine the level of innovation which will happen. Every single business will have to innovate. Every single entrepreneur will have to think about this paradigm shift and innovate. So can Kerala become completely cashless? That is the number one thing which came to my mind when I look at Kerala's future. And you have to aim for the sky so that if you get to the moon, you are okay. The second one I thought about was, can Kerala become completely carbon neutral? Because again, you are a small state. You can't build nuclear plants and you don't have coal mines. You don't have the ability to create energy, which means that you have to look at sustainable energy. Can Kerala become a state where it's only electric cars?
Only electric cars.
Electric vehicles. So that you become completely carbon neutral. Again, I'm not talking about tomorrow. I'm creating an aspiration which will again apply all this technology. Right? So that will again increase the innovation, increase employment, increase talent, increase capability. Because you do all this talent development, all that, when there is an aspiration to achieve something, right? And when you have these high aspirations, then you create talent for it, right? And the third thing which I had in my mind was, can Kerala become zero discharge state? That means complete waste management. Again, you have a huge challenge. You don't have enough land. You don't have enough space to dump your waste. You don't have enough place to recycle your water, which means that fresh water, even though Kerala is also going to start facing water challenge. So can you completely become, zero discharge state? So complete cashless, completely sustainable energy, completely
Electric cars.
complete zero carbon neutral.
Zero carbon. And waste management. Wow, that's the Kerala. Into that Kerala, let my homeland awake, it says Mr. Shibulal. I'm moving to Kerala, folks. Wow. Dinu, you're coming back home after how many years? A few 3 years, yeah. Is that your vision? How do you see Kerala? How do you see Kerala changing? How do you want it to change? How do you feel it can change? What is holding it back from change?
I can't say it any better than what Shrivalal just said. That's pretty exciting. I think that should be the vision. We should be imagining, and we should be imagining the best. But to your point about what's holding us back, and again, one of the best part of actually being part of this whole panel and being part of this event is actually, being away from India, being away from Kerala, you're removed from all the great things that it's actually happening. So it was great to hear about all the development and all the progress that's been made, at least what's been heard in the last 2 days. I think when you talk about Kerala, I look forward to a day when the world thinks about Kerala as the most digitally advanced state, and India, the country. Today when you, absolutely, that's where we want. Today, like when you ask around in the rest of the world, what is the most digitally advanced country, they say Estonia. At least that's what's heard of. Having the opportunity to listen to the ex-CIO of Estonia, there are a few things that I feel are important, so it's not a barrier. The first is there has to be a common purpose. There was a common purpose for Estonia, which was they had massive land and a very small population, so it was hard to get services to those people, so they needed digital. They needed technology to actually be able to provide services. So there was a common purpose they all embraced. The second is they're willing to take risks. Everybody told them not to do certain things, but they did it. They were willing to put things on digital, and because of that, there was some hacking and things like that, but they're willing to pivot. They went and created the first ever data embassy in Luxembourg. They started using blockchain way before the word blockchain was even really a buzzword. And the third is the fact that all constituents have to work together, and that includes enterprises like corporations, it includes the government, and it includes the citizens. We all have to want to make it work. The first time you see something not work, if you start blaming it, and if you start pushing back and you start saying that it's not working, it's not going to happen. And I think countries that have done it before is because all constituents really embraced it and worked together to see that as a reality.
Right, that's very interesting. I'm going to come to the other Keralite on the panel. Again, that's what Dinu's saying, that in fact, compared to all the other states of India, Kerala actually has the highest potential to be the most digital-friendly society and economy. And it has a tremendous amount of potential. Forget Cyberabad and Hyderabad and all of that. It really can all happen in Kerala. It has that potential.
So absolutely, I think let me just, clue you into a secret that most of us who have left Kerala, I left 36 years ago. I have a static image in my mind of Kerala. Even though I come to Kerala every couple of years, I still remember the Kerala where we didn't have as much traffic, and I still have a fondness for this place. And so when I look at it, I would like to answer that question from the end state and work backwards. What I see Kerala is a very sustainable, ecologically friendly, inclusive state that is uniquely enabled by the digital technologies. In order to achieve that, there has to be policies, government policies that enable that. There was a time when, for example, urban planning and transportation planning was as the same department in most countries. As the transportation, the current model of transportation, the road transportation developed, we created two departments. I think that Kerala has an opportunity to really have an integrated urban and transportation planning, given the fact that Kerala, because of the short distances we have to travel, is an ideal place for electric vehicles. And in electric vehicles in your future, if all automobile companies are changing into an electric vehicle. The second thing is that climate change and sea level rise is in your future. This is a state, and I will speak to my Cochin, if you will. It's a state, it's a city that's just a foot or two above sea level. And if you look at Hurricane Sandy, the waves that were created by the storm surge was 12 to 14 feet.
Right.
12 to 14 feet is a challenge, and you will see it already. Kerala is seeing large hurricanes. And so planning for that is important. And the only way you can plan and make the investments in levies and catchment is by increasing the tax base. The only way to increase the tax base is to increase the services to have a more dense population. So if you compare Manhattan, Manhattan is 1/10 the size of the Greater Cochin Development Authority area, and the population is 3 times the population. And so I think doing something in transportation, and finally, I would just say education. There was a lot of discussion about education. I just want to give you an anecdote. When University of California, Berkeley was set up, the legislatures intentionally stated as a goal that research should be, graduate research should be part of the campus, because the point was that you wanted to educate the students for tomorrow's jobs. And having an institution that is very high with research content is critical for developing students and the workforce of the future. And if you look at India, India produces worldwide, is well known for producing great undergraduate students who go overseas to do their graduate work. And I think investing and being intentional about research and education so that innovation is here, because that's the only way you can leapfrog other countries and other states, if you will, so that this can be this wonderful, wonderful, beautiful Kerala, right? I mean, it's a great tourist destination, and have a place where we can have in-migration, not only from outside the country, but also other parts of India.
So the Kerala model of governance would be one where there would be in-migration and a lot of emphasis, as you're putting on the ecological balance of Kerala. Harish, would you address that? Because Dino and Mr. Shibulal and Thomas all saying that, education important, in-migration important, but giving primacy to the ecological balance of Kerala, because that is very important, given the hazards of weather, given the kind of green paradise that it is. Would you place a similar primacy on that?
Absolutely. I think Kerala has got to build on its strength of high literacy, beautiful environment that we have here. I think it's a great tourist destination, and there is very little urban and rural divide in Kerala. If you drive through Kerala, you'll find very little divide between topography of places. So I think Kerala can be the first state in India which has got hundreds of smart villages. There's been a lot of conversation about smart cities.
Very good point. Smart villages, not smart cities.
Absolutely. And I keep hearing this statistics about 25 people migrating from a city to a village to a city every minute in somewhere around the world. And frankly, looking at the pressures of city, especially in Kerala, I don't think we can afford to have that. Neither do we need to do that. That's what technology can do. And therefore, we can have hundreds of smart villages in India where people can be where they are. We can, to your point on getting education, we can use technology to get high skill, high education in the villages, and also have economic activity in the village, which will actually grow, enhance the total economic value of the state. And again, to your point about the education, I think in the fourth industrial revolution, it is very clear that high skills will get high pay, and there'll be a big disparity between low skill and low pay, and that's going to bring in a bit of big division. And Kerala has got a great opportunity to build on its current knowledge society that we have, and then take it one step level further and bridge the divide. So I would really, again to your point, have a very deliberate policy of inclusion in the fourth industrial revolution, and Kerala kind of lead the way in that.
Right. Vinod, can Kerala lead the way in the fourth industrial revolution, be the knowledge capital of India?
Yeah, I mean, it certainly is. Kerala has very unique certain aspects. If you look at it, it's just one city. It's just one urban conglomeration. It's really not multiple cities like you see anywhere else.
Kerala is one city.
Yeah, I mean, there's no difference between them. Like, it's just continuously one city. Right. And then, you have an aging population. Our demographics compares with what is there in the most developed countries. Human Development Index is quite high. I am sort of one of those Keralites who spent, a week here and a week elsewhere, but elsewhere is not just the Western developed countries, includes Africa, Latin America, etc. So there's a huge opportunity to do that, and I have only a few things to add to what other panelists said about what could or should be done. We have scarcity of land compared to many other states, right? So you can't build roads as much, you can't have like 10, 12% of the land area set aside for roads, etc. So a lot of things like vehicles will have to go from ownership to usage, in addition to all the everything else that was mentioned. So, and I think we have to really achieve this, because of all these high human development index standards, we are not looking at going from a small base. We are looking at the society is going really from already a higher life standard of living, or a HDI baseline, if you want to put it that way. And we need to achieve that at sort of, for lack of a different, better word, sort of a developing country cost basis. And that's the challenge. And all this, whatever was mentioned about as cashless society, sustainable alternate energies, waste management, and I would add to that, going from ownership to usage models.
Wonderful, I think, and also if all you high-achieving Keralites came back to Kerala and made it all happen, that would be wonderful. Concluding comments, Professor Rangan, before we throw it open to the audience. Advice to Kerala entrepreneurs, advice to Kerala businessmen. How can they best improve the Kerala model?
Many, many emerging countries may say they are open for business. I would love to hear Kerala say Kerala is open for progress. And I think, Kerala really has, it's not just about business, it is about human society. Kerala is really a frontier in many, many ways, from female literacy to the Human Development Index and the natural beauty that is here. So I think this is fundamental. Now, two concrete things I would think of. If you want to put what Shibu said into practice, I would love to see a K-score. So K-score is a Kerala score. And it's modeled on something like city score for Boston. Boston mayor, every day, the Boston mayor walks in, like Shibu has an iPad, the Boston mayor has an iPad. He opens the iPad, it happens to be a he right now, opens the iPad, and there's a city score every morning, and the score is 1 is the normal rate. Anything below 1 means yesterday the city didn't function as it should have. It could be on safety, it could be on health, it could be on education. All of these, you can look it up in the internet. And same way, if you want this kind of zero solid waste, zero carbon, this kind of cashless future that Shibu talked about, this is possible. We need to track it. Today, the software and the data are there. A to D is the amazing technology called analog to digital. Just like R&D gave us intellectual capital, A&D, that is analog and digital, is giving us the cyber capital. We can use this, we can leverage it. And the final point I'd make is in terms of concrete things, let's, all the great companies that are here, from Infosys to KPMG, Tata, whoever else is here, let's please create every year, Shibu, an inclusion hackathon. Let's make sure that the technology is working for everyday lives of people in Kerala. And this hackathon celebrates not new defense applications as they might do in California or in Israel. Most of those countries, with the exception of Estonia, maybe Singapore, they all have strong defense sectors. Technology and defense go together. I'm not sure to what extent Kerala is exposed to the defense sector, but I think Kerala can lead the way for progress and make sure that this modern...
Let's get a quick response in from Mr. Shibulal on that. Do you think that kind of, hackathon where, every aspect of daily life in Kerala, health and education and transport and safety, women's safety, representation of minorities, all of this can be addressed?
I think awareness is the first step towards progress, right? One needs to be aware. So these are mechanisms to become aware. Hackathon, conference, conversations, these panels are mechanisms for society to become aware. So the most important thing is to have the social discourse. And that is the first step towards creating progress, because that is how you imagine new things. That's how you aspire for new things. That's how you hope for new things. So it is very important to have these social discourse mechanisms, and many of them, not only one, to create progress.
Right. I think we've had a very, very substantive discussion here on progressive business, on creating a humane technology, on using those technologies to make our society moral and progressive and not unconscious if super intelligent. So I think we've also addressed reimagining technology, reimagining business, and reimagining Kerala as a kind of leader in digital technology and progressive business practices and in compassionate business. Let's quickly turn it over now to the audience. I'm afraid we're running a little slow on time, so we just have about 10 minutes. The questions will be moderated via the Kazala app.
Check. We have more than 25 questions here, but then we'll have to pick a few, like ma'am said, because of lack of time. Combining two questions here. Do we have them on screen? Yes. How can AI help in wiping out corruption in our country? Combining it with how government organizations change with technology disruption.
Will you take that, Mr. Shibulal?
Oh,
How can AI help with removing corruption?
okay, those questions.
Make it more corruption.
I think,
I promise I didn't cook up those questions. They're not on the screen, but then they're here.
so I think, of course, fraud detection is a big part of AI now. AI is being used for fraud detection in all over the world. When you use your credit card, the person who is protecting your credit card is no more a human being. It's an AI sitting in the back. When you try to do something, so basically AI has the ability to distinguish what you should do and what you should not do. So eventually, of course, it can be used for that benefit.
I think you have a very specific question addressed to you. Shibular, sir, why do you think selective birth using genomics is scary? Selective birth using genomics, why is it scary?
So, nothing is scary as long as you don't use it for the wrong reason, right? So if you are actually doing genomics to prevent Alzheimer's in the new generation, it's perfectly fine. But when you start using it to create super soldiers, then you have a problem. So the selectivity is not the issue. What you select for is the issue. And that is where you need the moral compass. That's where you need the, what Subi talks about, the balance between performance and progress. So it is not about the selectivity, it is about what you select.
Yeah, what was mentioned here about defying death is equally scary. As it is, we can't deal with the population we have. Imagine death not happening, as much as all of us want to live forever. Next question.
At least we live till 150.
Okay, next question. Any innovation happening in India that's getting global attention? Because we only hear about global companies, or the names are all global.
Why don't you take that? Any innovation in India that grabs your attention? Yeah.
No, the mic isn't working.
First, I don't really agree with that. Right? I don't agree with that statement that our innovations happening in India getting global attention. Yes, we've seen, the most visible ones are a lot of business model innovations that's happening in India that you all see in the e-commerce space. Right? Like whether it is Flipkart, it's not really just a copy of Amazon, to really look at it. It started with a different business model. There's a lot of business model innovation driven by technology that's happening in India. It's getting global attention. You got the industry stalwarts here, and all of those really are recognized as innovators globally. I want to go on to a slightly associated point there and about entrepreneurs in Kerala, which you asked me to comment on. I think we can do it from Kerala. It's partly on personal experience. We have driven our R&D entirely out of Trivandrum with people who are from the local area. And today we have, we sit on more than 20 patents that are globally recognized. We compete with global companies. Of course, it had to be with the addition of a globally experienced leadership and partnership with academia. Like we work with IIT Delhi, we work with the academic organizations in Netherlands, etc. So it's really possible here. So that is a very small example, but globally in India, if you look at as a wider spectrum, a lot of innovation that's happening in India. I mean, we face people in other parts of the world who tell us that, okay, we want Indian technology and Indian people to deliver the technology. So that statement is something I don't really agree with. Why you see global names is partly because of what Raghuram Rajan mentioned earlier, saying that there is no risk capital available in India, and therefore most of them are owned, or ownership lies elsewhere. For that matter, all of the e-commerce poster childs that we see today, none of them are Indian companies. They're basically Singapore or elsewhere. But that's a different part. That's got nothing to do with innovation in India. That's about the financing structures, capital structures, and other aspects. So
Right.
that's my take on it.
You wanted to.
Yeah. First, on a lighter note, the Indian innovation that went global was the missed call. I think that we invented it in India. But on a serious note, I think I work for Cisco, for example, and we have our global delivery center operating out
Yeah.
of Bangalore. And years ago, we used to have end-of-life products come from bug fixing in India.
Right.
But I can tell you that right now, what we do is state-of-the-art, cutting-edge technology that happens here, and a lot of products are getting developed in India, which probably are getting sold all over the world. So I can
Right.
attest to that fact that we are doing a lot of innovative stuff.
Well, we've got dozens of questions and we're completely out of time. Yeah.
No, I just want to add, as usual, we are always hard on ourselves, which is a good thing because please remember this whole global delivery model, which the world is using today, got innovated in India. And that fundamentally changed the way service delivery is done. Everything which is happening, we are sitting here today because of that. That happened 30 years back when Infosys, TCS, Wipro, they all created this new model of service delivery, which is delinking the point of delivery and the point of creation. Fundamentally changed the service delivery platform. And that happened completely from here. So we should be quite proud of some of these
We
things.
shouldn't right.
Ma'am, there's
We just have time for one more
Yes.
question, I think.
That's exactly what I was going to say. There's something interesting. Somebody has asked for this panel's top 3 predictions for the best tech disruptions to come. Top 3 predictions of this panel. So maybe.
Top 3 predictions of this entire panel. So let's just quickly zip through the panel.
Yes.
And then we can conclude the discussion. So let me start with you, Thomas. Top 3 tech disruptions.
Top 3 tech disruptions. I think beyond Moore's law, and even though Raghu said quantum computing is not in our immediate future, which I agree, there is going to be technology disruptions in the hardware area, integration of, we didn't actually talk today about integration of sensors, the Internet of Things and the industrial Internet of Things. Those are, I think, innovations and disruptions that's going to be brought to the marketplace, that's going to have an impact on our daily life.
Right. Do you know? Top 3?
I'll just repeat what I said before. It's AI, augmented reality, and blockchain, and I think I kind of shared a lot about that. But the one
AI,
thing,
blockchain,
and augmented reality, those would be the 3 for me.
And 3?
I agree with him, and I would say that what will be the big disruption is the disintermediation that it will cause.
Right.
Society.
Vinod?
I think that 3 big technology disruptions are going to be in AI and computing, communications, and in the physical to digital world interfaces.
AI, communication, physical, digital interface. Professor Rangan, the 3 big tech disruptions.
So definitely blockchain, definitely it seems like AI and cognitive computing. And I think this A to D, the analog to digital, would be a very big one. But just to go back on innovation from India, I wish, the West can do the tech innovation. If India can do the trust innovation, we will win the 21st century.
Professor Rangan is just coming up with so much of wisdom this afternoon that it is really, I really think you should go away and write a whole article on this. Progress and development, moral business, and now you're saying this balance between trust and technology. Really, these are really educative themes that I think we can build on so very well. I'm going to give you the last word, Ms. Shibulal. The 3 tech breakthroughs and what you're hopeful about.
I think one is trust, the way we handle trust. Today, there is so much of energy and money and time spent on managing trust. So it is not about technology, it is about trust itself. How do you handle trust? I think that's number one. Number two is travel. I think travel will change. The current mode of transportation is very ineffective, very carbon heavy, and I think that will fundamentally change. Third is medicine. I think we will move towards personalized medicine rather than the procedure-oriented medicine. So today we talk about personalized medicine. I think it's just starting to come. I think it will happen over the next 20 years. So medicine will be created, probably 3D printed at your home for you. So personalized medicine.
Personalized medicine, trust, and travel. So I think we have really a wealth of ideas have come out of this panel. I think we've had substantive exchanges. We've had highly knowledgeable exchanges. We've had very dramatic themes being illustrated as well. It's been a wonderful session. Thank you very much to all of you, and thank you so much for being here. Thanks a lot.
Ladies and gentlemen, I now request Mr. Shibulal to present mementos to our panelists, starting with Mr. Dinu John Parel, Chairman of the HPIC, is presenting mementos to Dinu John Parel. Next up, Mr. Harish Krishnan, Mr. Subramanian Rangan, Mr. Subramanian Rangan, Mr. Thomas Zachariah, Mr. Vinod Vasudevan, and finally, our brilliant moderator, the most entertaining person, Ms. Sagarika Ghosh. Sagarika ma'am and gentlemen, can we please have you pose for a picture? Please step up.